Hello, everybody. Today we have Dr. Christian Ketels amongst us. He is a professor at Harvard Business School and is here to discuss the India at 100 competitive roadmap, which talks about economic, social, and even political developments of the country and how it will shape the nation ahead. Hello, Dr. Ketels, and welcome to BW Business World.
Thank you very much, Urvi. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
All right. So how did this idea of a competitiveness roadmap for India at 100 come about? What was the process like while framing this report?
Yeah, it actually started a couple of years back. So I lead the research team at Professor Michael Porter's Institute for Strategy and Competitiveness at Harvard Business School. He had been coming to India for many years. I've been working with him a lot on these previous trips. And on one of those trips, he had a discussion with Prime Minister Modi, who had invited him to give a speech in front of Niti Aayog about the competitiveness framework and how it might apply to India. And the Prime Minister then took on that idea and he challenged us and said, why don't you do an analysis of where India stands today and help us think through what could be kind of key principles and specific actions as we think about the next 25 years of our country's economic development. So that's what we've done, and hopefully it has been or is a useful contribution to the debate in India on where to go next.
And what were your key findings of this report? Of course, it's a huge one, and we can read it at leisure when we want to. But if you had to summarize it, how would you like to brief us about it so that we can proceed from there?
Yeah, as you said, I would really invite you to download and read the report. It's sort of long, but it has several pieces that you can read in individual parts. So there's a quite long part on the diagnostics on where India is today. And this is quite important because one has to understand that competitiveness is not like a blueprint that looks similar for every country. What you have to do is really to understand the circumstances in your country today to set the right kind of goals and prioritize actions. And so that was a big part of our work to try to get a consensus on where we stand in India. But let me focus a little bit on what are some of the key elements of what we're proposing. So as we think about this roadmap, there's two key pieces that are sort of more principles, and we hope they will shape the thinking for years to come. There's a lot of uncertainty about how the next 25 years will plan out. So we'll hope that they inform the way that India is approaching whatever history and the geopolitical context is going to throw at us. And then there are two pieces that are more concrete and about policy changes today. So let me start with the principles. First of all, it's really about what are the aspirations that India as a country has for its economic development. If you look at the debate, there are a lot of different ideas about the size of the economy, about real growth rates, about how much renewable energy we should use. So we talk in the report about the need to really aggregate that in a holistic way. We talk about the 4S principles to think about goals, first in terms of prosperity, so GDP per capita, kind of anchored in terms of the key measures of economic development. But then also think about the 4S. What are these 4S? So one is shared. We need to make sure that these aggregate improvements in GDP really reach wide swath of Indian society, both in terms of rich and poor, but also geographically. We need to create a society that gets better at creating opportunities for people, also the poor, to grow, to self-sustain themselves over time. So that's a key piece of what will define success. Second element is sustainable. India has huge energy needs. You need much more affordable energy in the future. At the same time, you're also extremely exposed to climate change. You don't want to be a contributor to further climate change. So how to create a renewable energy-based CO2 neutral energy system, I think will be a key part of where we need to go. Then we talk about social progress. I think we've all recognized, and I'm an economist, but I fully recognize that the quality of life is not just about GDP and income. It's driven by many more things: education, healthcare, freedom of expression, and so on. And I think we've gotten better at measuring these things as well. India needs to achieve economic growth that goes hand in hand with the social progress. And the fourth piece really is what we've called here stable, often discussed as resilience. So the ability of a country to really deal with shocks. We had the pandemic shock. We now have rising food prices. unfortunately, our world looks like it's going to become even more risky and unpredictable. So I think setting out the right type of goal in a holistic sense is important. Second issue is really about what's our development model. And there are two key observations that we're making in the report. One is successful economic development in the future will have to be an integration of both social and economic development. At the moment, India is pursuing these things in parallel. Both are seen as important. There's been major efforts by the government to improve the efficiency of social policies and the delivery to the groups that really need it. But what we are arguing for is, rather than seeing them as silos, really integrating them. And there are a lot of concrete examples where we argue that social policy is needed in order to enable economic growth. Let's think, for example, about employment for women. That is only possible if you make an offer around childcare services. It's only possible if you have enough public safety so that women can feel safe to go to work and their families can feel safe that they can go to work. So these are interventions that are not traditionally thought about as economic policy, but they are enormously important for economic development. At the same time, investments in, for example, healthcare services are a social need. India really needs to do more. You're one of the countries that spends the least in your income group, and a lot of the spending comes from private purses, not from the government. But it's also an economic opportunity because we see huge potential for more jobs in this sector to grow. So kind of the integration of economic and social is very important. The other aspect is that we need to think new about how economies are evolving over time in the course of economic development. We've termed the phrase here structural transformation 2.0. Now, what does that mean? So we've seen throughout history that countries usually go through steps where they start with agriculture, they go in through industry and manufacturing, and then they go to services. India has much more quickly ramped up services before really become an industry powerhouse, and many see that as a problem. I think, however, what we see in the global economy is that trusting industry growth, often connected with the export of manufacturing goods, to deliver the type of job creation that India needs is unrealistic. The technology conditions are different today. The global trade conditions are different today. There are clearly important opportunities here, but on their own, they are not enough. So we need to think about growth of a wider array of sectors to create the type of jobs and value creation that India needs. And we lay out in the report what the selection criteria could be and what the sectors concretely are that could be mobilized. Now, these are, please, Urvi, go ahead.
Since we're talking about the 4S, a lot of it is dependent on the social sector as well and how we progress as a society and the like. But at the moment, India ranks, I think, 133 out of 188 countries in the Human Development Index. So how can we bridge this gap in the next 25 years? Because 2047 is not that far, even though it sounds so. So what are your key inputs in this regard?
Yeah, and I think this is a good sideway into talking about the more concrete policy recommendations that we've built into the report. First of all, it really is about the principle to not see economic development and social development as different elements or competing priorities. We really need to solve these equations simultaneously. Now, how are we concretely doing that? We put a strong focus on job creation, because I think what we see is what ultimately helps the poor the most is to get them an entry into the labor market. And in the labor market, then an opportunity to learn, to upgrade, to become more productive, and to earn higher levels of income. Social policies are necessary to kind of help them where they are now, but they don't provide them with the ladder to really help their being. So we've identified sectors that we think are good entry-level opportunities for those that are currently not working and that have lower levels of income. The other piece is, as I already mentioned, I think there are a number of social policy interventions that we need to tie more closely with economic development. Let me also give an example of one of the currently pursued policies. That's the job guarantee schemes. I think that can absolutely be an instrument to use and has been used quite effectively in India. But we need to make sure that these job guarantees actually create jobs that provide a pathway into more productive jobs. And they are not just kind of a parking lot where you get some money for a safe job, but you're not really becoming productive and you're not growing and you don't create more opportunities. If that's happening, I think India will be able to make bigger strides, and it already has made significant strides in battling poverty.
Okay, so do you foresee that these developments will reach the last man standing by 2047? And how does being competitive help?
Yeah, this is not a guarantee. I think what I can guarantee you is that if India does not react to the challenges that we've identified in this report and does not kind of try out the type of policy interventions that we're suggesting, there's very little chance that just automatically growth is going to reach all these poor people. Now, conversely, a lot of things are happening. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world. I think what we're suggesting will create many more opportunities for individuals, but then it still depends on their hard work, on their risk-taking, on their willingness to grow and build stronger companies and get involved in them to do this. So economics is not a guarantee, but it can create opportunities real opportunities for people that they can pursue, and that's what we're trying to do with this roadmap.
Okay, so I was going through the speech you delivered yesterday. I happened to be attending it. So you said an interesting thing that India manages to address its major challenges, which is something that will have a bearing on how the world tackles these challenges. India's performance matters. So what do you feel are India's strengths and unique advantages that could enhance its value in front of the world?
So let me first point out two of these global challenges that are very relevant in India. One we already talked about, where will the jobs for the next generation of individuals come from? That's a very real question for India. It's also a very real question for many parts of, especially Africa. And so far, we don't have a very simple answer to that. The old simple answer was industrialization. It doesn't work anymore. We lay out a path that we hope can enable India to try to solve this problem. If it works, I think there's a lot of potential for other countries. The other one is moving to a net zero economy. India, as many other economies, needs more affordable energy. At the same time, we have an opportunity here to create that affordable energy by using renewables, and actually along the way also create a lot of economic activity. If India manages to do this, it will become a symbol for many other countries. And of course, it will avoid what otherwise would happen, which is India contributing a lot to the CO2 emissions that we're already seeing. So I think that's why India's success is so important for the world. Now, how is competitiveness going to help? We need a more effective system for policy making and implementation to address these type of challenges. And so in the report, we talk about the implementation architecture, or what we also call competitive government. India actually does a lot of things and announces a lot of policy ambitions that are exactly spot on. They are trying to address what we've identified as key challenges. The struggle is often in the implementation. And so a large part of the report is about how we can improve coordination across the many parts of government. So, the central government has 52 ministries just at the union level, just imagine how to coordinate across all of them, but also across the geographic levels of India. You have huge states with huge internal heterogeneity that have to make their own choices. They face very different realities. You have a need to build up much stronger district and metropolitan area governance systems, because for them, we need planning. We need to make a lot of those choices. Factors that influence productivity and job creation are often quite local. And so we need to create the right choices locally. That will be a key part of making India successful over those next coming years.
Of course, intra-country and interministerial interaction coordination is of pivotal importance. But having said that, so my final question comes now that apart from internal coordination, what are the external shocks that can threaten to topple India's ambition to prosperity?
So first of all, let me say that I do think the major determinants of India's success are domestic. This is a huge country, geographically, economically, population-wise. And so you are influenced by the world, but you are a little bit more like the US or China in the sense that long-term, I think a lot of it is actually in your own hands, which hopefully is good news. But the reality is that we are living in difficult times. Climate change is a global issue that affects all of us. India will need to respond, and it will need to find global coalitions to respond in order to deal with that. Geopolitical tensions are a concern. They affect global trade. They affect energy supplies. India is a kind of a non-aligned but value-based economy and democracy in Asia in this system. And so you will have to balance these type of pressures that you'll face from different groups, thinking about your national self-interest, but also the role that you can play globally. And then we have, you know, the maybe older type of trade disruptions that we've seen, you know, already before the pandemic with the US-China trade war. India being a little bit more skeptical about the Asian trade agreements where China participates. Again, you know, need to find your way. Being open to international trade is absolutely critical for competitiveness, but it also requires Indian companies that are able to kind of leverage these type of opportunities. So it's kind of a combination of building your domestic capabilities and the external openness that is required. Finally, you know, we're just through COVID, but also now in India, the numbers are rising. So who knows what's around the corner? India, that's why we focus so much on resilience and a stable system. We need to make sure that Indian society doesn't get blown out of whack by a shock like this. And we've seen tremendously worrying numbers about the millions of Indians that have kind of moved back to poverty, at least temporarily, through the pandemic. So that's something, unfortunately, that I think India, as we all, need to prepare for.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Ketels, for joining us and providing your insight, and also for being a key part of India at 100 Roadmap report that was released yesterday. So with that, I'll take your leave, and thank you so much for joining us and providing your input and briefing us about the same.
Thank you so much, and I hope your listeners will enjoy the show.
Certainly. Thanks.